To find more recipes like this, and to receive some good counsel on how to live without refined sugar, please look up this title on Amazon, No Sugar Added, or How I Live Without Refined Sugar and Still Enjoy Life by the Highway Groupie. The book is available exclusively on Amazon. Hi, I'm the Highway Groupie, and today we're going to be making apple butter. This has got to be my most popular recipe on YouTube. We're going to be redoing it because we're doing it a little differently from the previous recipe, and we're going to be incorporating things from applesauce to this. You'll see exactly why in a minute. Anyway, let's start off with what we need. Obviously, apples. So we have Granny Smith apples. Granny Smith adds tartness as well as a bit of sweetness and volume, but tartness. And these are Gala. They add sweetness. Some people like a Macintosh for this. I don't. Some people use Cortland. I really don't like Cortland for this. It just does not have the character of the taste to make a really good apple butter for me. I like mine a little bit tart and sweet. So that's why I'm using this combination. If you like sweeter, use more Gala, or use an apple such as ambrosia. Even delicious apples can be used, although delicious apples don't have as much sweetness, they don't have as much flavor as some others. But Gala, ambrosia, some of those. Spartan, definitely out. Cortland, definitely out. Macintosh, I'll leave that up to you. I don't like it. Anyway, so here we are. This particular Granny Smith at this size, and I try to get them as big as I can. This makes it easier for coring and peeling. But anyway, this one is just a little over half a pound per apple. We have 8 of them, so we're running about 4 pounds of Granny Smiths. In the Gala, we also have 8. They run about 3 to the pound. So we have just under 3 pounds for the Gala. So that's our basic recipe as far as apples are concerned. Now, for the rest of it, we are going to need a little bit of salt, very little bit, you'll see. Cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and this is cloves. You could also use allspice instead of cloves, that's up to you. Apple juice, and you notice that this is unsweetened. This is not sugar-free, of course, because apple juice has sugar in it, but no sugar added, or unsweetened apple juice. So there's no refined sugar goes into this. The other things we're going to need, of course, are the Dutch oven. We're going to need a little bit of a knife here, and this is for coring, also used for peeling when we're making the applesauce. Now the apples for the applesauce are in the sink behind me. They're waiting. Why do we have them in the sink? Well, we do wash everything. All the fruits and vegetables that we use are always washed before we use them. The reason for that is there's so much in the way of news from Europe, Canada, the United States, other countries, where there's disease being shipped with your fruits and vegetables. Just simply washing them with soap and water will get rid of 99% of that. So that helps. I live in a tropical country, so definitely you want to wash fruits and vegetables here, even though we're going to be cooking them. There could be things on here that you just don't want in your recipe. So now let's go to the stove. You'll notice that the stove has a heat distribution plate here. This is a gas stove. The same could be used for electrical. You want the heat to be distributed as much as possible under the pot. Now the pot, you'll notice, has a very heavy bottom on it, so that helps with the heat distribution, but still we want more. Now the juice that we see here, how much of the juice are we going to use? Well, you notice that it says this contains 64 fluid ounces. So at 64 fluid ounces, we're going to use half of this, so we're using 32 fluid ounces of juice. So I happen to work in milliliters more than fluid ounces. So I'm going to be measuring this in milliliters. And it's just about 950, give or take. And there we go. Now what I do with the rest of this is I only use this, I never drink it straight. So I just put this in the freezer and it's ready for the next batch of apple butter. Let's add this to our pot. Now right away we're going to put our spices in. So we're going to start with the salt. This is what we use least of. Do not put a lot of salt in this because this is going to be cooked down. The more salt you put in, it really gets accentuated in the end. So we're just putting in a little bit. The salt helps to bring out the sweetness as well, and it helps to keep it from tasting flat. But if you don't want salt, don't put it in. Okay, cinnamon. I like a lot of cinnamon. So that's how much I put in. The cloves or allspice, depending on what you're using, either one of them, they're very strong, so you do not want to put in a lot. This is just put in as an accent. Same thing with the ginger. Ginger, small amount. Because when this cooks down, that ginger is going to come crying out, so you don't want a lot. Now, nutmeg, I like fresh nutmeg, so I'm going to use my little... Okay. So that's how much I put in. So if you want a rough equivalent, that's roughly the amount of nutmeg, maybe a little more. There we are. That's about the amount of nutmeg I put in. All right, so now it's time to start getting to work on the apples. This is for coring the apples. This is to pick up a little bit of juice because when it's cut, it always leaks a little bit of juice. And I don't like it all over my counter, but it's optional. All right, so we anchor it into place, and then we just take our apple. So what's important here is to get this to line up with this little hole here. If you're off one way or the other, then it's not going to core properly. And we're going to take the knife out of the way. There's a little lock down here for the knife. So we're taking it out of the way. Now we're going to take this, we're going to just put it in partly, and then I go down with my left eye and I line it up, and when I'm assured that it's lined up, and it's in place. Now, how does it core? Where do we need the knife? We need the knife now to just cut it down the middle. It helps to make sure we're not using up extra space, and it helps us to see if there are any little seeds being taken in. So I can see that there's a little bit here. So I just take that out. Again, there's a little bit here. So I'm going to remove that. Okay, so that's how we do our apple coring. Keep this separately. Same thing with the Gala apples. Just start it a little bit in, go down, check and make sure that you have it properly lined up. Push it the rest of the way in. These are a little bit easier because they're smaller, of course. And there you go. Cut it in half. If there's a bit of bruising, you can see there's a bit of bruising here. It's not a problem. We're going to bruise it more than that. Now while we're working on the rest of the apples here, we still have a few to go. I'm going to put the heat on. You start the heat at medium. It can be a little bit higher than medium, but more or less there. Once it really gets going, we're going to turn it down to low and just keep it going on low. We're also going to find that this pot is probably not big enough for even all of these apples, which is okay. I'm going to use a second pot. The reason we're using a second pot is the peel from the apples that we're going to be using for applesauce also need a place to cook, and there definitely won't be room for them in here. So we're going to need to cap that and go on to a second pot. I notice in the second pot we're just using a little bit of water as a starter, and we're not putting any of the spices. That'll all be mixed later on. So we now have everything on the stove. Everything is heating up. I'm going to start working on my applesauce while this is heating. And don't forget, the peel from the applesauce is also going into this mix. Now let's stir up our apple butter a little bit. I just want to get some of the things off the bottom into the top. If you're wondering what the other pot is beside it, this is applesauce that we're making. And we took the peels from the applesauce and we're putting them in the apple butter. In fact, we have them in the back pot here. I don't know if I can get a shot of it, but I will try. So this seems to be doing quite well. We want everything to get a little bit mushy, and then we're going to run this through the blender. Okay, so here are the peels from making the applesauce. Again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to let them cook down a little bit, same as the rest of the apples. There's the couple of apples that were left over that are also in there. So we'll let this cook down a little bit. And I see that it's lacking a bit of moisture. So we can fix that. As they say, we'll borrow from Peter to pay Paul. Yeah, that should keep it in good standing for now. So both of these are now running at low heat on top of a heat disperser. So that should help to cook it down. This is going to take many hours. First is about an hour to an hour and a half to get the apples soft enough to run them through the blender. Once they're through the blender, we'll be able to put everything into one pot. You'll see that everything fits nicely into one pot. And then we just let it to cook down on low heat. Okay, we're going to check in on our apple butter here, see how it's doing. You can see a little bit of bubbling coming up, a little bit of boiling. So this is not quite soft enough for us to run it through the blender. So we'll take some of the ones that are at the top, push them down a bit, but it's not far, maybe another few minutes. And then we let it cool a little bit, and then we run through the blender. It does not have to be cold. Well, it depends on your blender, what it can take. Mine will take fairly hot. And here's our second pot with the peels in it and the last two apples that we couldn't fit in the original pot. And you will see once we blend this down, this will all come down to just the one Dutch oven. So let's check on this. This is good. So we can shut this off now, let it cool a bit, and then we're going to run this through the blender. And we'll check the peels. And yeah, they should be soft enough for that. So we'll see how we manage all of this in a few minutes. So I'm going to shut this down. front and back, and let them cool. Alright, so we've made it now to the point where we're going to blend our apple butter. In fact, this may be even a little softer than it needed to be. Okay, so we start with some from the main pot. And as you can see, well, you'll get to see the level that we fill it to. This can be a little bit messy. Alright, we also need some of the peels. So we'll take a few of those. Now you need to make sure you have enough juice in there, so I'm just going to add a little more. Because if you don't have enough juice, it will have a hard time blending. A little bit more. Alright, let's try that. Blend it at medium. So to finish it off, I gave it a little bit on high so that it would finish mixing it around. So that's basically what we want. And we're going to do that with the whole Dutch oven worth. So we're back on the stove. What we're going to do is we're going to set this to low, and we're just going to let this cook for hours and hours and hours. Every once in a while we'll have to come, just give it a little stir, and at various points I'll show you the progress of the texture. So we'll set it to low. So we have it on low heat. We're going to cover it, but not completely, because the idea is we want this to evaporate down. So we're just going to put the lid about like so. Now, what sometimes I do is I cover it completely until it starts to boil. So that allows it to build up the heat. And then once it starts to boil, then I leave the lid akimbo a little bit. Okay? So it could be like that, or a little more. So right now we're going to cover it completely, let it heat up to a boil. Once it starts boiling, then we will move the lid a little bit to allow it to evaporate. Okay, so I just turned this down to low. As you can see, it's just starting to bubble up a little bit, which is good. So now that it's starting to bubble, you see the little moisture that's left on the lid? Throwing it in the sink. We don't want to throw any liquid back in there because the idea is to get the liquid out. So now at this point, you could actually leave the pot uncovered and let it boil. After a while, it's going to start to spit though. When it starts to spit, then you should put the cover on, but leave it akimbo like that. So right now, I'm just going to let it cook like this. Now this gives you an idea after 2 hours how it's gone down. You can see where it was here. I don't know if you can actually see the line here, but there's a line here. It's about a thumb and a half. It's gone down that much in 2 hours. This has to cook down to less than half of what we see in the pot now. So it gives you an idea how long we have to go. Always be very careful when you're stirring. If this is bubbling up, this is not too bad. But sometimes it starts to spit. And if this spits on you, it will scald you. And this is very hot, and because it's thick, it stays hot a long time on you. And it can burn deep into your skin, so be very careful. Right now it's not spitting, but I'll show you a little later how I use sort of a shield when I'm stirring this. You can also take it off the heat in order to stir it, let it settle down a bit before you start to stir. Sometimes I have to do that, even using a shield is not enough. So we're just giving it a little bit of a mix here, so that now if you look at the bottom of the paddle, there's nothing thick on the bottom of the paddle, which means that there's nothing sticking to the bottom of the pot, which is a good thing. But you can also see it's starting to coat the panel. It's getting thick. Where are we at? Well, we've gone down about 2.5 thumbs worth. So now at this point here, you notice I'm wearing long sleeves. I also use a shield. Some people use an oven mitt. The point is, we do not want this to spray. What's going to happen when you start to stir it, you see that spitting? What will happen, it'll spit right up onto you. So you need to protect yourself, because this is very hot. It'll stay on your skin and it'll keep on burning. It's not like hot water that splashes you and then it gets cold. And then check your wand. If you have a lot of solid along the edge here, it means that it's burning on the bottom. So we don't want it to burn. We don't mind getting a little bit of dark, but this is still quite loose. It's doing very well. This has been 4 hours. We can see that it still has a way to go. It has to be darker than this and a little thicker than this. We can't get it to keep a little shape. It should really keep its own shape when we do that. It's not doing that, and it needs to be darker. Also at this point, you may want to put the lid on. Just put the lid on a little bit of Kimball, because otherwise it's going to spray your whole stove. All right, so now we are at 5.5 hours from the time we started cooking these. This is how we're doing. Okay, we can see that it's darker. Level's gone down. Now we have to stir it, so we're going to protect ourselves. Also protect the stove. Like I say, some people use an oven mitt when they're doing this, which is fine. It's a good idea. Okay, stop perking. So now we can get an idea. Is it burning? No, we can see that nothing burning here. Is it making peaks? Can we make a peak with it? Well, a little bit. Peaks aren't very sharp, but not bad, not bad. It's getting there. Needs to be a little bit darker than that. So we're going to give it a little more time. Well, we're just a little over 6.5 hours into the cooking process, and this is looking good. In fact, I'm going to shut it off, and I'll show you why in a second. Again, when we're mixing it, take our precautions while the steam is bursting out there. Okay, so you see these little craters. Watch I'm going to make a little peak here. You see how it stays nicely? Also that kind of a heaving that we see. It's another indication. You know that it's about thick enough. But again, it's to taste. If you like it not as concentrated, then you would have stopped this a little earlier. But you also see, remember how we started. We had this pot full, plus we had another pot going. When we went to blend it, it all came down to one pot. And now we just have a little bit in the bottom. Actually, we're going to have quite a few containers. I'll put the final quantity of containers just here, and you can check that out. The containers that we put this in, I usually store this in the freezer, and I freeze it in containers that are roughly 200 milliliters. I forget what that is. I think it's about half a cup. Anyway, 200 milliliters. So that's roughly, each little container holds that. This is the container, you can see it here. So about a 200 milliliter container. I fill it up to this line here. The reason you don't fill it right to the top, when you put it in the freezer, it's going to expand a bit. Then you get a bit of juice coming over the edge, and well, you don't want that kind of a mess in your freezer. So use little containers like this, whatever you have, roughly 200 milliliters. You bring it out, let it defrost in your refrigerator, because about that much, if there's only one person eating this, which is the case in our household, then it will last about a week if you put a little bit on your toast in the mornings. And that's about what you want. You don't want it to last too long, because if it's too long in the refrigerator, it will start to show its age, so to speak, start growing hair. So about 200 milliliters, each little container in the freezer, and then take them out as you wish. Doesn't that look good? And again, distributing the heat, we don't have that. Any burning, there is your Highway Groupies apple butter. Hi. If you enjoyed what you saw in that video, then please click the subscribe button over here. Yeah, that one. Click the subscribe button, please. And whenever I put a video up, you will find out about it. Please.